Well, good morning and welcome everybody to the Arizona Association for Economic Development's second virtual workforce symposium. My name is Carrie Kelly and I am the Executive Director for AAED. We are delighted to have three leading voices in economic development joining us today to discuss preparing a workforce in the new normal. Our format for today will be short presentations by each of our three presenters, followed by a Q&A session. If a presenter sparks a question for you, please feel free to write it in the chat feature, and we will get to all the questions after the presentation. And if we run out of time to answer questions, we will provide answers after the session. So first up, I would like to introduce Holly Shore. Holly is the Vice President of Mission Services for Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona. Holly has worked for Goodwill for over 8 years and is responsible for leading Goodwill's mission strategy. She has an extensive background in workforce development and human resources. So take it away, Holly.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Carrie, for having us on today. And I'm excited to talk to everyone about what we're doing here at Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona to prepare our workforce for the future and the new normal, I guess, as we're calling it now. And our focus is really going to be on digital literacy and coming out of all of this, really focusing on foundational skill sets that many of the workforce don't have, particularly in industries like retail, which our organization is supported by retail operations. So the post-COVID discussions, we believe, will likely have to cover the fact that this has accelerated digital transformation across all industries, which feedback into the digital skills gap and how we as a workforce value chain can move the different market segments in terms of worker skill sets into alignment with new demand. So just to talk a little bit about what we're doing and our who we are. So our foundation is really built on three core areas. So career development, training services, and education. And we're really trying to meet job seekers wherever they're at in any stage of their career life cycle. We were happy and are grateful for Governor Ducey for funding us the Arizona Together grant as an essential business. And so we just wanted to make sure that we thanked him for all of his support, and to really, our retail operations were really able to reopen, and our career centers were really able to reopen based off of his support of us being an essential business. The way we provide services to the job seekers are through our career centers and learning labs, and then online we have a tool called mycareeradvisor.com, and it's basically an online platform that helps job seekers connect to community resources, career services, support in job services, as well as we, through all of this, we were able to very quickly deploy in-person classes that we were teaching in our career centers pre-COVID, and started delivering those online and through our platform called My Career Advisor. Our mission services is focused on keeping people connected, so connecting people to a variety of resources, being flexible in the way that we respond, and personalizing the services that we provide to job seekers, and making sure that we're aligned with what is happening in the economic development and business community, so that we follow trends and can also help people find jobs that are focused on more than minimum wage. So our vision is to end poverty through the power of work. And so we really want to focus on helping connect job seekers, not just to minimum wage positions, but to positions that will help give them those foundational skills they need to move into their career. And one of the things that we really value and hold ourselves to in high regard is making sure that we are making data-driven and evidence-based decisions. So I want to talk a little bit about some of our outcomes. So just to kind of snapshot how we're performing this year and what we're doing. So far this year, we have served over 19,000 people through our career center network. Pre-COVID, we had 19 locations. We are now operating 7 locations. We've provided through those locations and through the My Career Advisor platform over 117,000 services. And you can see we've started to provide credentials and services for job seekers to help upskill them. We've delivered over 203 credentials so far since the beginning of the year. Most importantly, I think, is really focusing though on that average wage. So you can see our average placement of those that are coming out of our programs is around $14.83. We're really proud of this because training is something that we've just recently gotten ourselves into, and Goodwill training services, we were averaging placements that were right around minimum wage. So we are working to really make sure that we're helping people connect to jobs that have higher wages. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the supply. I know we've all seen the news, we've all heard the information. You can see that, since April, the unemployment rate has jumped up to 12.4%, over 580,000 initial claims since March 21st, unemployment insurance claims, and the supply is high. So coming into pre-COVID, we had record low unemployment, and the competition was really on the employer in terms of being competitive and being a great place to work to attract that very low population of people that were actually unemployed or underemployed. And now in like 60 days, the tides have turned, and now we are having to really respond from a workforce group on how we're going to help job seekers be competitive in this market. When you look at the demand, so looking at job postings currently in Arizona, so you can see the trends throughout the year, record high job postings, and now we are sitting at overall a negative 29% job postings since COVID, 31% nationally. The change in job postings with minimal education, so the jobs that require little to no skills, so those entry-level positions are roughly about 17% nationally, staggering for Arizona, negative 26% in job postings that require minimal education. And then when you look at those that require considerable education, there's a decrease again in upwards of 34% in Arizona, and nationally 37%. So what this is really telling us is that the impact on job seekers is going to be in industries that require minimal education, and also probably some basic foundational computer skills. And then we're also looking at, the change in work, how people will perform their jobs. Many organizations are not reopening their offices until after the new year. So you're talking about having to really focus on teaching people how to work remotely. And if you are lacking the digital skills that a lot of these job seekers are missing, then that's going to be a challenge for people to change careers and change trajectory in what they do. So this is what we refer to as our employment ecosystem. And I mentioned we talk about ending poverty through the power of work, and the importance of that in our community. This is the ecosystem that we abide by. You see everything there from our employees to our community partners, employer partners, our donations, our digital tools that we utilize. But this is really our guiding ecosystem to help us make decisions as to how we're going to be delivering services. So some people really don't understand the setup of Goodwill and how we are funded. We are a workforce organization, but we are funded through our retail operations. So I just wanted to briefly talk about how we have responded. So March 16th, our career centers closed down. And then when the stay-at-home order happened, our retail stores closed down for 2 weeks. And then we were deemed an essential business. And we took the opportunity during that time to really respond to what was going to be right for our community. And we were the first business in Arizona to receive a Healthy Verify certification, which it covers everything from the cleanliness of our stores, how our employees have to perform now under different circumstances, contactless donation, again, enhanced sterilization, how we respond if we have an employee that tests positive for COVID, how we test, how we even enter our buildings now as employees for our organization. And then we also really expanded our operations in e-commerce. So the reason why this was so critical for us is because we do not take federal dollars to run our programs. Our programs are 100% supported by our retail operations. So it was important for us to reopen our stores, one from a funding standpoint to help us run our training services, but then secondly, to make sure that we're responding as a responsible business in our community. And just so you're aware, here's how we've responded since COVID. Since March 16th, we completely shifted our business model, and we went from in-person services to really a lot of outbound services, reaching out to job seekers, working with our community partners. We reached out to over 10,000 job seekers since March 16th. As I mentioned, we have since reopened, but we were looking for any way that we could to really help job seekers in our community, whether that was helping them with online resources, deploying our training services to the community in a different way, and looking at how we can now get people back to work. So since all of this has taken place, we've also expanded our connections to hiring employers. So at this point, we have hosted a job fair in every market. Over 175 job seekers have participated in those monthly hiring events. When we reopened our career centers, we reopened with the focus on really helping people with unemployment insurance application assistance. While we don't have access to the system, the UI system, we still have team members there and readily available to support the job seekers as they at least go through the application process, and tips and tricks with our partners in workforce and at Arizona at Work. And as I mentioned, we expanded the way we deliver services. So we were on a trajectory to begin really building out our training programs. We had started with a basic digital literacy certification called a North Star certification back in 2019, and we planned on expanding that to Microsoft Office certifications by the end of this year. And with the need to respond to COVID, we jumped on the Microsoft Office certification and actually did about 6 months worth of work in 2 weeks, and were able to deploy that. We now currently have 105 participants in our Microsoft Office certification program. So we're really excited about that, especially as we look at the data and trends that are telling us that folks are going to need to be competitive in the marketplace. And we believe that there's a lot of things that they can do, but even to prepare for training opportunities with our Arizona at Work partners, we feel these foundational skills will be critical. We also have a Google IT certification and are currently getting people through that program for in-demand jobs within tech. We do have some upcoming hiring events, so I wanted to share that if you know people who are looking for employment and who need access to these resources. Also, if you know employers who are ramping back up their hiring, we are hopeful. We are doing a virtual job fair on Wednesday, and then that Friday, the employers will do interviews over Zoom. So we're working with job seekers on how to prepare for that. And these are our upcoming dates, and you can see the markets in which we will be hosting these virtual hiring events. Lastly, most importantly, it's really about the people we serve. And so I just wanted to share, some testimonials from some of our team members who have worked directly with job seekers, and the importance of really having access to resources. Yes, we know people can access technology, and there is a large population of people who, have access to a computer at home, but someone like a Rosa who came in and was only applying for jobs on her phone, and was definitely, the resources are limited in terms of the computer labs that are available, with the libraries not being open, really not having a computer accessible for a job seeker like Rosa was stopping her from being able to fill out more complex job applications like with Honeywell. And so because we were able to reopen, Rosa was able to come in and get the resources she needed to apply for the job at Honeywell. And just hope. I mean, really, that's what we're seeing the most of, is job seekers out there want to get back to work. There is a sentiment of, none of us know what's coming next, especially with COVID and all of the things that are going on in our community right now. But, they come to us, they need validation, they need resources, they need hope. And we're really happy that at the end of the day, if that's what we can do to help these job seekers, that's, where we feel like we can bring value to the workforce system. And with that, I will pass it on to the next presenter, but I look forward to any questions about some of the work that we're doing today at Goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Or sorry, thank you, Holly. Now I want to turn it over to our next presenter, which is Stephanie Ray. She is the Executive Director for Arizona at Work, Northeastern Arizona. She has worked in workforce development for over 6 years and develops programs to help the unemployed and the underemployed obtain their necessary training and experience. So Stephanie, take it away.
Okay, too many screens up. Sorry about that. I had to get myself off of mute. So I am the executive director of the Arizona at Work in Northeastern Arizona. So we cover non-tribal lands in Gila, Apache, and Navajo counties. So we have a pretty large geographic region, very rural region. And so we had been looking at ways to support businesses and also offer some virtual services to job seekers. And so that was happening prior to COVID. And so we're jumping back in and finding that that is even more necessary now than ever. And so we have several projects that we're working on to support businesses. The first one I want to talk about, so we've partnered with Local First Arizona to develop an entrepreneurship training and support system and ecosystem, if you will. And the way that we're going to start that is we're going to start with some hands-on workshops for businesses to help them build capacity. Local First has been really amazing at developing workshops on the fly that are very specific to what's gone on with COVID and helping businesses kind of navigate that. And so we'll bring in some workshops to help businesses understand, how they can differentiate, kind of set themselves apart from the competition, pivoting operations, building e-commerce, digital marketing, social media marketing, and then e-commerce training that will be an expanded training about building and enhancing their website so that they can really focus on reaching out to customers even when their doors aren't open. We've also partnered with Moonshot, the business incubator in Flagstaff, recognizing that right now a lot of businesses have some ideas for pivoting. The necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so during COVID, people were pivoting on the fly and figuring out how do we continue to stay afloat while our doors aren't open. And so now maybe those have turned into ideas for ways that that business can move forward and expand their service delivery, even now that they are able to open their doors again. And so the way that this works is we've done pitch events with Moonshot. We did a pitch event last year with them, and it's kind of a Shark Tank style pitch event. Well, they have now gone virtual as well. And so we're going to have an opportunity for businesses in our region who have a pivot idea to fill out an application. They'll do a virtual pitch, a 5-minute pitch in front of a scoring panel. They'll get some mentor feedback at that time, and then scholarships will be awarded. And the scholarships will include their curriculum. So Moonshot has a curriculum that walks individuals. Generally, they're working with startups. And so they're working with individuals that maybe just have an idea, and that curriculum takes them through to launch. And so they'll be able to take advantage of that curriculum. They'll also be paired up with a mentor that will assist them one-on-one. They'll have 12 hours of one-on-one mentorship. And so over the course of a period of about a year, the 5 scholarship winners will be able to work on these pivot ideas, these new components maybe to their business. So along the lines of pivoting and new ideas for business, those employees are going to maybe need new skill sets. And so incumbent worker training is a form of training that is offered through Arizona at Work. And it's work-based training that's really aimed at helping to avert layoffs, increasing skill levels of employees. And so we will be working with businesses as they are doing these pivots and helping them walk through what are those skill sets the employees are going to now need. And then we can come in and assist with the funding a portion of that training in order for these employees to be able to keep their jobs, and ideally with the new skill sets, they can increase their wage a little bit. So back to Local First. So as we're going through all of these programs with businesses, Local First will also be engaging in a feasibility study. And so they'll be taking all this data from these business owners as well as kind of assessing the region and determining feasibility for an ongoing entrepreneurship ecosystem and what are the components that really are needed that businesses have an interest in our region. Do we need a business incubator? Are businesses, do we have some work from home folks that are looking for a co-working space? Can they use microloans? Should we be developing a revolving loan fund? And so over the course of the next year, they'll be building out that feasibility study to really determine how can we best support small businesses moving forward, and what does that look like? What do we need to add into our region? What's the gap? Where are the gaps right now? Another project that we're working on that we feel is really crucial, especially given the fact that right now labor market information is changing rapidly. What we thought that we were dealing with in our strategic planning 4 or 5 months ago, it doesn't even look the same today, and it will continue to change rapidly. We don't know how long this rebound is going to take. And so what we'd like to do is build out a framework that will allow us to gather information from our local businesses real time, so that we know how quickly the labor market is changing, how it is changing, and how we can support those changes with these programs that we've developed. Do we need additional programs? Again, continually assessing gaps in our service delivery. And so this initiative that we've started, we will be pulling together employer and stakeholder collaboratives throughout our region. As I mentioned, we've got a very large 3-county region. We've got 5 or 6 very distinct hubs. Each of our regions is very different. We have very different economic bases, very different industries in each of the regions. And so we are going to go in and develop a collaborative for each community / sub-region to really start gathering information from these stakeholders. What is it that, what are the strengths of each community? Where are the gaps in each community? We're going to ask those stakeholders to set local goals for each community, and then we'll develop community profiles. And so as we are developing this and as we're gathering this data, we're also going to be developing a technology piece that will have a dashboard where we can collect that data, we can track progress toward community goals. As part of this initiative, we will be integrating a project called Talent Pipeline Management. And again, that is, we're working with Local First on that. They're bringing that into Arizona. And that is about engaging in that demand planning, understanding what those workforce needs are going to be, both numbers of employees that are projected to be needed in certain occupations and industries, but also what skill sets are needed, coming together and having the local stakeholders communicate and identify, define competency, credential requirements, really start analyzing talent flows and building talent supply chains. And so we're really trying to create a framework around which we can have valid real-time information to best assist the employers and best build those job seekers, give them the skills that they need so that they can succeed in this new normal. And if I had to guess, I don't think that we even fully know what that even looks like a year from now. I think we're going to be continuing to have to pivot as a workforce system. I think that the more information that we can have, more data that we can collect around what's happening in real time. I know I keep using that, but so often, historically, we are doing a lot of strategic planning around information that is old. We're looking at historical, and from those historical numbers, making projections about what could happen. I think that is going to become less and less valid as the system rapidly changes, as employers continue to pivot and needs change very quickly. So for job seekers, we, again, large rural region, we were already looking at how do we reach out to those job seekers, how do we meet them where they are. We have a lot of areas that have big barriers with transportation. We have 5 job centers within our region, but even those 5, there are some huge gaps in service delivery. And so we have a lot of we have workforce partner staff that are on the road meeting customers where they are. And so in an attempt to really make that better, more cost efficient, we are developing an integrated technology platform. And what this will allow us to do is to provide those virtual services. So it'll bring together the Arizona at Work partners. In our region, we're also bringing in community-based organizations. And so that will provide multiple community access points for job seekers wherever they go for any type of a service or a benefit, assistance with whether it's rental assistance or help with behavioral health, anything. We feel like there's so many organizations that cross paths with the same job seekers that we're working with, and so we're going to be able to meet that job seeker at any number of access points, have them be able to do a common intake and assessment, ideally one-time eligibility documentation collection, so that, again, we're able to meet the job seekers where they are. They're not having to make multiple trips into a brick and mortar center. And times when those brick and mortar centers are not open, we are still able to seamlessly provide services. We found very quickly during COVID, and especially during the shutdowns. In fact, most of our job centers are still not open and completely accessible to customers. And so it's more crucial than ever that we are able to continue to provide services and not skip a beat. And so that's a huge project that we're working on, and we're pretty excited about that. It's been a long time in the making. The prototype is done, and we've identified a developer, and they're actually starting production right now. And so hopefully, if there comes a time when things shut down again, we are able to just keep moving, keep providing the services to those who are in most need, particularly when we're in a crisis situation. So with that, I will turn it over to the next presenter.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephanie. I think if COVID's taught us anything, it's how integral technology and the internet is to everything that we do. So I appreciate that. Next up, we have our final presenter is Stacy Faulkner. She is the Senior Manager of Rural Development at Local First Arizona. Stacy has only been with Local First Arizona for about 6 months, but is certainly not new to workforce development, having worked with Maricopa County and Maricopa Workforce Connections for over 10 years. Stacy.
Thank you, Carrie. So I am going to take a little bit of time to talk about talent pipeline management, which Stephanie referenced in her presentation. So for those of you that are new to talent pipeline management, or you'll hear me call it TPM, TPM is an initiative of the United States Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And in the beginning of the year, we were awarded a grant from the governor's office to deploy TPM in the rural communities. So TPM, it's a demand-driven, employer-led approach to closing the skills gap. And it's really a framework that's composed of 6 strategies that when implemented in a particular sequence, it makes for a talent supply chain approach. And I am having some difficulties here, so bear with me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So though our team is very small, we're mighty. So we have Liza Nolan, who is our Director of Rural Programs. Liza really is the individual that has set the footprint for Local First Arizona in the rural areas. We have Solange Oleva, she's our Programs Coordinator. So she's really responsible for doing a lot of our marketing on our website and creating a lot of the programs for our youth, and then the community profiles that you'll see on our website. And then you have Kimber Lanning, who is our Executive Director and Founder for Local First Arizona. So a little bit about Local First. We are a nonprofit organization that really works towards implementing programming to build a more diverse and resilient Arizona economy. We do that many different ways. We do that by leveraging local businesses to build economic resilience. We do that by business retention and expansion, placemaking and destination marketing, youth engagement, elevation of food systems, and then economic assessment and analysis. And Local First Arizona is actually the largest coalition of locally owned businesses in the country with over 3,200 businesses across Arizona. Just recently added the workforce development piece, which TPM falls under, and that's the project that I am mainly going to be deploying in those rural communities. So this slide really explains how TPM would help understand the root cause from a business community. So if you take a look at some of these charts and graphs, you'll see that the reality of rural Arizona is that 85% of new jobs being touted at the state level are going to Maricopa County. The bar chart shows the disparity in the job growth between Maricopa County and other regions. And then the closest region to Maricopa County is Yuma. And you'll see on the chart that they're only reporting 78 jobs per month as compared to 190 jobs per day in Maricopa County. So I think that this slide really represents how necessary TPM is in some of those rural communities. When we talk about setting the table for why a talent-focused initiative is needed in rural Arizona, you'll see that Arizona is actually ranked 38 out of 50 states as far as workforce participation. So currently, rural Arizona has over 110,000 jobs to fill. 89% of those employers cannot find qualified workers. So employers are struggling to find the talent that they need to fill those in-demand critical jobs. But in turn, 35% of those job vacancies are unfilled due to lack of training. So educators are also finding it difficult to know how to respond to employers' dynamic needs. And then the learners, the students, and the workers are requiring more transparency and information as they transition from education and training into the workforce. 60% of those Arizona employers are also projected to grow moderately to high levels of growth. And in today's economy, employers must constantly restructure their work roles, skills requirements, and career pathways in order to adapt to the modern competitive business environment. So just another reason why talent pipeline management is extremely important in some of those rural areas. Now, a lot of people will say, why is TPM different, and is TPM just like a sector strategy? Well, as you can see, 90% or 98% of educators do feel that they provide a skilled workforce. However, only 11% of those employers agree. So going back to TPM being a demand-driven, employer-led initiative, it's really important to focus on the data. It's important to focus on the return on investment for those employers. It's important to improve relationships between employers and educators in the business sector in the rural communities. And it's extremely, extremely important to gain a strong network with shared purpose and shared accountability. That way we can close the skills gap or work towards closing the skills gap. One of the collaboratives that was done in Kentucky actually reported that they had over 220 employees placed over a 3.5-year time period, which saved over $30,000 per hire due to the TPM process. The savings were through recruitment costs, onboarding, turnover, and unfilled position costs, and those positions yielded a 98% retention rate. So a little bit more about TPM. So those of you that are familiar with the supply chain management, TPM is much like supply chain management, where you actually take a raw material and manage the process or flow until you produce a final product. This chart shows you that in TPM, you're actually identifying a preferred provider, building a talent supply chain, collecting that performance data, and then managing the ROI. Once the ROI is improved, you would continue scaling solutions for ongoing continuous improvement for the employer. So, like I said earlier, TPM is an end-to-end talent management system where you communicate the demand and then manage the supply chain. 6 steps in order to do that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I do want to explain each individual step just a little bit. So step 1 is really where you organize an employer collaborative. So this is where you would create a collaborative that organizes employers identifying the most promising opportunities for engagement around similar workforce needs. Once you've done that, you would move into step 2, where you engage in the demand planning. So you would develop projections for job openings, determining with accuracy the type of talent and how much of it employers need. So this is really where you would pull, or I would pull as the facilitator, that in-demand data, the current data, real-time data, everything that is going to help them strategize as far as planning for what they think is going to be their demand. Strategy 3 is where we would communicate the competency and credential requirements. And so we would want to work towards creating a shared language to better communicate competency, credentialing, and other hiring requirements of critical jobs in a way that would allow the employer to signal similarities or differences, because this process really is to benefit the employer. We'd move into step 4, which is analyzing those talent flows. So identify where employers historically source most of their qualified talent and analyze the capacity of those talents or of those sources, as well as untapped talent sources to meet their projected demand. Strategy 5, build talent supply chains. So this is this is the most critical piece, and that's where you would build and manage the performance of that talent supply chain to create a positive return on investment, not just for the employers, but for all partners. And then strategy 6 is really just continuous improvement. So how do we use the data from our talent supply chain to identify the most promising improvement opportunities to generate a better return on investment in the future? One of the things that became important for Local First Arizona during COVID-19 is how do we take TPM and pivot it towards recovery? So how do we use that framework to help some of these businesses recover from what they lost in that 2 to 3 month shutdown? So we took a look at the 6 strategies, and though most of them would stay current, we did talk about how we could evaluate their current crisis and then continue to manage that. So if you'll take a look at step 2, step 2 is generally where we would gauge in demand planning, but we thought maybe we could pivot that a little bit and start identifying critical crisis occupations. So as many healthcare clinics were overwhelmed during COVID, I think that they had an opportunity to really take a look at what positions were really important and what positions may not be as important. So they were able to identify those critical crisis occupations. And then the thought would be to continue taking them through those 6 strategies, but in step 4, instead of analyzing the talent flows, pivot that to some type of a crisis plan development. So if they did a temporary training program just to get individuals skilled up in-house, how do we make that long-term so it's sustainable? And then step 5, which would normally be to build a talent supply chain, how do we align partners and determine performance metrics, again, for recovery and sustainability of those employees and the businesses? A couple of examples that we wanted to share is the wildland firefighter certification. So I'm not sure how many of you are actually aware, but when the wildfire started this year, they had a group of firefighters that actually were tested positive for COVID. So very quickly, they had to think of how to train up a bunch of individuals or a bunch of employees that weren't certified to fight fires to be able to do that while their team was recovering from COVID-19. So they developed an in-house training program. It was a real training program just to get them prepared and ready and certified to be able to do that. But how do we take now TPM and really put the wildland firefighter certification through that process, through that recovery process, to make sure it's sustainable long-term? And then the same for the emergency caregiver certification. There were some areas that, care facilities that didn't have any empty beds and needed additional staff. So what they were doing was taking their admin staff and, again, in-house training them to become a caregiver so that they could jump in and help, the regular nurses and CNAs and caregivers with some of that demand. So they developed this in-house training certification temporarily so they could get people taken care of. So how do we then deploy TPM across that certification or across that healthcare coalition to make sure that it's sustainable long-term? And that is all I have for you on talent pipeline management. If you have any questions, of course, put them in the chat box and we will be sure to address them at the end. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everybody. It looks like we've got a few questions out there, and please, if you have more, write them either in the chat or in the Q&A. We've had a few answered, but I just want to get to one of the first ones, which was for Stephanie, and that was the Arizona at Work. Is that just in the Phoenix area, or is that outside the Phoenix area as well?
So Arizona at Work is available throughout the state of Arizona. We are funded through Department of Labor funding, so it's actually the services that we offer are actually available nationwide. So there are 12 local workforce development areas, and so there are a little bit of differences in how services are provided, but they are statewide.
That's wonderful. I had a personal question because I think it'll be interesting. How are each of your organizations funded? And I know Stephanie just touched on it a little bit, and Holly in her presentation, but I think they're all different.
Yeah, so I'll just finish out. So we are funded through Department of Labor. We also have, we founded a nonprofit last year, and so we actually have a nonprofit entity also that works alongside with the Workforce Board. And so as that ramps up, we do have some foundation funding as well that we're working off of.
Stacy, how about you? How are you guys funded?
So we're a 501c3. We're a nonprofit organization. We do have business members that pay membership dues, but we also do fee for service, and we go after grants.
Great. And Holly, how are you funded?
Yeah, so we are a 501c3 nonprofit as well. Our retail operations are our primary funder, so they fund about 95% of our mission services throughout Arizona. And then we also seek out grants found from foundations, from various organizations, and then we do partner with some organizations. We do partner with Arizona at Work. We partner with the Coconino County Corrections. We do a reentry program there, but our primary funding comes from our retail operations.
Great. It's great. So they're very different. It's very interesting how all these different programs are funded throughout the state. Stacy, somebody asked where the stats are from your website. Where did the stats come from that were in your presentation?
So the stats about Kentucky workforce actually came from their chamber and their workforce community. They put those together for us. The rest of the stats came mainly from like a Talent Neuron, Wanted Analytics, a lot of your real-time labor market tools, OEO, and ACA.
Cool. And in the chat, Holly answered the question about where her stats came from too, and a lot of hers comes from the opportunityinsights.org, which is a free site that has a lot of data. We had another question, and this was for Holly or anybody else. You mentioned the difficulty in job seekers accessing computers during the shutdown. Having job seekers dependent on physical resource rooms was clearly identified as a gap in our collective service delivery model. How do we overcome this dependency? And will we need to find alternative ways to assist job seekers without having them come to a physical building?
I think that's a really great question. I would almost say it's a question of how is our collective community going to come together to support these job seekers, whether that's access, better access to broadband within their community. I know we partner with Cox on their reduced internet services, and a lot of their the people that they're serving through that program even don't have good enough access to do some of these online trainings within their community. I'm sure Stephanie can speak to that in the area that she's serving, and Stacy with the rural markets. I mean, those are huge challenges for our communities, and I think it's larger than just making sure we have a physical space or that they have a computer. It's overall, do we have the right broadband infrastructure, and how is our community set up? And I think, I would look to our economic development partners to really, help us drive that and move that forward in our community, so that when we are faced with this again, which we are, I think, all anticipating that this could be something that we prepare for in the future, how do we make sure that the community has the things that they need to continue to function?
Have you seen over the years, all of you, sort of the use of technology and workforce development become more and more and more important?
Yeah, sorry. I do. I think it is more and more important, but it is also that balancing act of, we have transportation issues, and so we're trying to tackle that with a virtual system. But then we also have broadband, big gaps in broadband and internet access in our region. And so how do we navigate that? We're trying to close one gap, but then there is another. And so in rural, yes, resoundingly, yes, technology is becoming more and more important. But in rural in particular, it creates a whole new set of opportunities for growth.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing that. So 5 years ago, we had 26 career center locations. We will come out of COVID probably with less than 10, just because we were starting to see a decline in traffic patterns and the need for those physical locations. But what this has shown me, and I think I'm sure I know Stephanie mentioned that her workforce centers aren't open. We do partner with the Arizona at Work offices at the city of Phoenix, and they're the one place that is probably the most trafficked in their centers is the resource room. It really showed up. We saw it differently at 3-4% unemployment, but now that we're toggling at this 12, 13, 14% unemployment, those resources are really needed. So we're even trying to think about what that looks like. But I will say, a lot of our initiatives, even pre-COVID, have been on really focusing on the digital transformation of our world. I mean, you can't go to the grocery store and not use technology anymore. It's woven into everything that we do. And so how, as a workforce system, are we, tackling trends and careers? But in order to get people to those high wage jobs and great careers, we have to introduce technology and resources. So I think it's tackling this from a lot of different angles.
Sounds like people in workforce development are sort of like the MacGyvers of workforce development, because it seems like you have to have a lot of different ways in order to get things done. And I know that personal touch is also really important, and having those career centers that people can go to is also really important. So it sounds like sort of a balancing act between the in-person and also the technology as well. It's great. Do we have any other questions or any closing remarks from our panelists?
Well, I'll just share. I know there were 2 questions, at least for me, and thank you for those that reached out and asked the questions, but in case the collective group is curious, I had 2 separate questions about the cost of the programs that we provide. And because our retail operations fund or we have grants to subsidize the training portion, all of our services are at no cost, including the certification programs. So folks can find information about our career center locations, and job seekers would just need to connect with one of our career navigators to take the proper assessments and get enrolled into those certification programs.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you to Stephanie, Stacy, and Holly for your presentations. And also thank you to Joel Millman, who's our chair of our Workforce Symposium committee for AAD. We are always looking for participants, committee members, and help. So if anybody wants to reach out to myself and be a part of that group, it's just carrie@aaed.org. We did record this webinar, and we are going to have the webinar and the presentations on our website, and we'll send those out after we're done here. So I hope everybody has a really great week. Thank you to everybody for being here on an early Monday morning, and I hope to see you again. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.